For those who are here, thank you for your patience. We appreciate it. Just waiting for a few more folks to hop in before we get started. Thank you for coming today to join us during our discussion. No rush on my end here. I'm happy to start whenever you two are ready. Oh, great. Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah, let's go. I think as people can trickle in, but obviously we're recording this and make all this available in various channels. So I think we can start.
Fantastic. Great. Well, thank you to those who were able to make it today. My name's Adriano. I'm going to be helping leading the discussion today. I want to introduce you to Max Rudman and Danielle Adams, two very important figures in this space. Max is the CEO of our company Prodly here, and Danielle Adams is the VP of Lead to Revenue Transformation over at Globant. And I just wanted to set this up to keep it almost like a casual discussion and also explore some topics today. I know that Max and Danielle have generously granted their time to speak with us. I guess to start off, I'm very new to this space. And as you know, we've met very recently. I'm a newcomer to Prodly and really excited to be talking with you two today. I guess we'd all really be curious to know about your background and how you two met and how you connect in the industry.
Awesome.
Sounds
Well,
good.
let me start. I think that'll kind of naturally lead to how we met. So as Adriana said, I am CEO at Prodly. Prodly is my second startup. My first company was called Steelbrick, which built a native configure price quote CPQ solution on Salesforce platform. And that's how Danielle and I met. She was, I'll let you talk about that, Danielle, but she was a great customer of ours who was implementing a full quota cash transformation, and really enjoyed working with her. And I'm really excited to be on this webinar with her today to talk about some of the best practices and what we've learned today. Danielle, over to you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Max. Yeah, as Max said, I mean, now currently I'm part of Globant's revenue platform strategy team, where I think if I put it in the most simplest terms, we partner with our clients through our assessments, through our design and plan engagements, through our vendor eval and select engagements, to really help our clients drive returns on the investments that they're making in both transformation and technology spend. And as Max mentioned, I had the pleasure of meeting him probably, gosh, I want to say it was 8 or 9 years ago when I was a customer myself. Leading a digital transformation for a SaaS healthcare technology company. So we were, I think at the time, correct me if I'm wrong, Max, but pretty early adopters of SteelBrick CPQ and billing.
Yeah, I think you were certainly one of the first adopting the full spectrum, right? So obviously, I mean, for those of you who know some of the background, SteelBrick started as a pure play CPQ solution, and then later on we acquired a billing company, and so kind of now it's this full quote to cash or revenue cloud as it's called. So yeah, you were definitely one of the first kind of adopting the full end-to-end solution.
Definitely. And I think I always like to say I definitely know what it's like firsthand to implement these new technologies and processes in parallel to supporting business as usual as a customer. But I've also seen how these initiatives can really transform a business and saw those results myself as well. And I think it's one of the reasons I decided to jump to the partner side of the fence to help bring that customer perspective and be the partner I think I wish we had had to see around corners and navigate the complexities of just transformations in general. And I think, Max, I always say I just lucked out with timing. And I think I really got to know you even better serving on the customer advisory board once Salesforce had acquired SteelBrick. So being able to be part of that from its inception until I was no longer a customer, it was great interacting with you and the whole team.
Absolutely. Being a trailblazer is hard, but rewarding. So I'm really, really excited to see you build a career out of this. It's an exciting space, and we'll hopefully we'll use the next 40 minutes or so that we have to share our hard won and learned experience and help the others coming after us.
It's great, guys. That's awesome. And speaking about experience, I think that's a great segue. It's very apparent that you two are industry veterans, right? You have a lot of experience in this space, have a lot of experience with business transformation and seeing things change over time. I guess while we're on that topic, right, I think a very good point to keep in mind is operationalizing a lot of these different business functions, right? So when we think about bringing a product to market, I'm sure a lot of people would be curious to know, how do you ensure that the processes led by these internal teams are being done effectively? Are there anything that you're implementing that that you see across marketing, sales, delivery, billing teams that you see to be effective strategies when doing this?
Yeah, great question. I'll start if you don't mind, Max. I think just to even take a step back, because these things really are transformations. And I think one of my biggest lessons learned is it's not just about putting in the tech. The tech is a big part of enabling everything, but I think keys to success are the process and the policy changes that the technology ends up enabling, and being able to have business agility. And I think really some of the common goals that, you know, me as a former customer and now helping clients as well, a big driver to these transformations really is, and you know, the choice to introduce these new solutions such as a CPQ, and needing something to help with the change management and the DevOps, you know, all the pluses that come with a CPQ being very data driven, but then needing a tool that helps that time to market and being able to bring the products that you sell to market quickly. I know it was a big piece of what drove us for our transformation at my former company, was being able to, hey, get the new products and pricing that we're selling to a customer in the hands of our salespeople as quickly as possible. And it was something in the past that could take upwards of 8 weeks. It required developers to do coding. It required extensive testing, and it could be anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks before the sellers were able to sell that. So I think just even in the tooling, being able to be agile and to introduce that agility into those market changes. So everything from being able to take that product to be able to sell it, to book it, to bill it, to receive payment on it. And I think a lot of the times what we see across our client base, and I think as I experienced as well as a customer, is, all those very fuelers of our growth that help us grow so fast, like new product introduction and expansion into new markets and acquisitions and expansion into new channels, is that the very things that helped us grow fast were also the things that started to introduce friction into processes and systems and really erode our performance and ability to do so quickly.
Yeah, thanks, Danielle. And I mean, these are exactly the challenges that we saw and why we kind of built Prodly. But, really, I think I go back to what Danielle alluded to, right? At the end of the day, all these projects are part of a larger digital transformation initiatives, right? And the whole idea is to become a more nimble organization more responsive to customer needs. Right. So there's a lot of moving pieces to that, but one of the key pieces obviously is making sure that your business systems are highly adaptable and agile, and so that you can make those changes very quickly and be a responsive organization, right? And whether it's CPQ or products or field service or whatever it may be, I think this general concept of business agility is super important, right? In fact, it is so important that it's part of our tagline at Prodly, right? Well, business agility delivered, and that's why we say that, because how effective can you be? How can you transform yourself digitally if your business systems are rigid and stiff, right? Not very much. And so that's a key component of that, and that I think goes well beyond CPQ or quota cash. It applies more broadly to business systems in general. And driving that agility, reducing that friction is what we're all about at Prodly. And so I'm really looking forward to continuing this conversation with Danielle and help you guys think through some of these issues up front.
That's great. Thank you, guys. I think that was really insightful information that you gave to us. As we talk about some of these business functions and making sure that you're agile, I'm sure we all feel it, right? There's a lot of market pressure out there right now, like we haven't really experienced before, to be able to capitalize on product potential. I know we talked about being agile and some of the things that we can do in that front. When we face that friction, how do you two personally respond to market changes? Maybe going more nuanced into that segment, talking about strategies and really being able to respond to that, because I'm sure there are things that we can't always predict in the market, especially when we want to be agile, but there are these other circumstances that might be out of our control that are kind of affecting our decision making. So maybe speaking a little bit about that and how you two effectively respond to those changes when they do come up, when you do face that friction.
Well, maybe I'll
Yeah.
start this time. I can sort of lay out the framework, and maybe I'm really curious to hear what Danielle has to say on this. As she's been in those shoes implementing quota cash specifically at a customer, and I'm sure she is living this all the time, day in and day out in her role at Globant. But from the sort of the systems perspective, I think, systems and the process perspective, I think it's important to lay down the right process, and like what that means for you obviously is going to depend on the size of your organization, the requirements for agility, right? There's sort of generally, a trade-off between speed and sort of quality, which that's sort of the inherent dilemma, the IT dilemma that we at Prodly aim to solve, right? But at the end of the day, the reality is still that, if you're a big public company, you need to take more precautions and probably need to have more process than, if you're, 10-person or 50-person high growth startup. Right? That's always going to be that range of the appetite for risk. So finding, the right process is obviously very important. And then I would say it's collaboration, right? Because certainly with quota cash, it's one of those unique categories of software that spans and touches multiple business functions, right? Sales, marketing, product, finance, right? All these teams have are stakeholders in the quota cash implementation. And whether it's or deployment, I should say, whether it's the new implementation or ongoing changes, right? They're all stakeholders. So building a collaborative environment, and of course also IT. I should add, right, that fundamentally owns these business systems, right, from kind of the operations perspective. So bringing all these groups together in a collaborative environment, I think is key to effective and streamlined change management process. And finding ways to allow those business stakeholders to not only provide their inputs, but also to contribute to change management, right? Because IT, obviously, it's a very common problem we see, is very often the bottleneck, right? And so while there are certain things that absolutely need to go through IT, right? You obviously don't want your finance team to be writing code, or revenue operations team to be writing code, but there's a whole lot of things that they can still do, and certain changes that they can make themselves to unbottleneck IT, and to to allow them to focus on truly the things that only they can do. So finding what that balance is for your organization is probably going to vary depending on who you are and what industry you're in, whatever. But I think it's really important to think about how to engage the business operations teams that own these applications, that are the stakeholders, and bring them into the change management process.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more with all your points. I think number one, we always like to say, product to revenue is a team sport, because it really does. Even catalog management, all of it needs, a team of a cross-functional team collaborating from intake through development, through deployment, through iteration to maintenance of that catalog, having governance and process and protocols in place so that that idea of catalog management or packaging becomes a value driving function in your organization. So you're not at a place where, the system's determining and dictating the creation of SKUs. It's really about go to market. So I think, to another point you made, Max, as well, our whole philosophy and what we evangelize is that go to market should really set the pace and North Stars for all the design that you do in your systems, because that's what also helps you stay very agile and be able to adapt to business changes. So that catalog just really becomes the brains behind the end-to-end process. And it really does establish that common language, as Max said, to, everything from product to product marketing, to sales, to customer success, to operations, to finance. It becomes that language that speaks and enables processes and experiences from end to end. And then I think a final point you made too, Max, and I think, much like change management from the people side, from the enablement, from the adoption, I think another area where people tend to not think about, because you're so focused on implementing the technology, really does come around some of those change management controls, especially when you are embarking on a transformation. The earlier you can think about that DevOps process and how it impacts not only IT, but all the other functions, it also impacts your sales and your financial controls as well. So getting that audit team involved early, defining materiality as you're starting to transform and bring new revenue onto these systems, when do those new controls and testing kick in? So making sure you have that early focus so you can start updating those control narratives as well.
Yeah. And I think I absolutely agree. And, and I think it's an interesting, this is where the trade-off comes in, right? Because inherently agility and compliance are, at odds, but how do you move fast without breaking things, right? That's the big challenge and the big opportunity for organizations. Particularly, if you're a publicly traded company, I don't know, Danielle, if you see this, but we certainly see this with our customers. One of the interesting sort of trends that's happened lately is that, the auditors, the external auditors, are starting to wise up to the fact that, with introduction of apps like Salesforce CPQ that are configuration data driven and are in the revenue stream, Salesforce is now in scope for SOX, right? And now you have to think about how do you not only have the controls in place, but also have a plan for providing evidence of those controls, right? Which is what the auditors are going to ask you for, right? And it's not just code changes, right? It's also the data changes, which is how CPQ is primarily configured. So thinking about, like to Danielle's point, thinking about this, during the implementation and ahead of time is super important, because you're going to face challenges with this, and whether your auditors have caught up to this yet or not is only a matter of time, right? Because they will.
Absolutely. Experience that firsthand, and definitely give that advice to clients as well. Don't wait to think about this.
That's great, guys. Yeah, I think that really paints a good picture in terms of how to actually do that effectively, and definitely keeping those points in mind. I think one thing that I heard mentioned was product adoption, right? And of course, you can make sure that your business functions are as effective as possible to be able to generate revenue. I think one of the things that people often overlook are strategies to identify these types of like underutilized assets sometimes. Um, how are you getting the most out of what you already have? I'm sure people want to implement stuff right away and be able to adopt that product, but how are you able to capitalize on what you currently have so that you can convert unused, or like what we would call like underused shelfware to actually be able to generate revenue for your company?
Yeah, great question. And I think a big theme that we saw on the partner side this year, especially from January on, was, hey, a lot of companies were in the position of, we need to be able to do more with what we already have, or with even less, with less operational support. And so I think, a big part of what we do, especially because we're so process driven and through our assessments, we're finding areas where the client maybe isn't taking in full advantage. They don't understand the full spectrum of the feature functionality of the tools that they have. So really looking at those processes. I think a big clue to that too, and what we'll see a lot of times is, wow, there's a lot of customization or tech debt in a certain area because the client isn't necessarily realizing the fact that, hey, we, with just some configuration or being able to leverage certain features of the tools they already own. So I think that was definitely a common theme we've seen across the board this year. And I'd be interested, Max, to hear what you guys have been seeing on your end around that adoption of tools and licenses.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of the same trends you are. Obviously, IT budget are on the strain. There's a lot of IT stack consolidation. There's a lot of pressure on IT teams to do more with less, I would even say. And so, so I think it's really important to look at sort of quote unquote shelfware and do an analysis first of why is it a shelfware, right? Is it sort of a change management problem in the sense that you didn't do enough training? Is there pushback on the process? Or are there kind of more structural problems? Maybe it doesn't do what you were hoping to do, or maybe it's too hard to make changes to it, and so people sort of revert to the old ways. So I think there's lots of reasons why IT purchases may be on the shelf. But certainly, obviously, in this environment, I think the pressure is on, and the spotlight is on these underutilized assets, as you call them, Adriano. I think the solution is probably both to kind of do the business side analysis. I'm sure, Danielle, you guys see a lot of that, trying to sort of do health checks on, certainly Revenue Cloud implementations. And again, I don't think it's a problem that's specific to Revenue Cloud. I think it's broader in general, to business systems. So that would be one place I'd look, and maybe engage a consultant like Globant to help you maybe think through it, look at it through a different set of eyes. But also, I think, looking at sort of the internal change processes and see if maybe that's a problem, right? Certainly, we see CPQ underutilized, right? I can't tell you how many times I've heard, from customers, well, we don't really make that many changes, and I'm like, well, why do you have CPQ if you're not making changes, right? Like, what is the point of this, hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes, or millions of dollars investment you're making if you're, making, 3 changes a year, right? That just doesn't make sense to me. So I think there's probably some education and some cultural shift that needs to occur, and to really kind of fully grasp the potential of whatever technology it is, and making sure you're getting the most out of it.
Great. Yeah, no, that's very insightful. And I know, Max, you're talking about CPQ and some of those considerations at that time, right? For folks to keep in mind. Maybe we can delve a little bit deeper into that. Maybe trying to determine that, this was also partly a question that I was seated in. And what should organizations keep in mind when it's best time to engage with CPQ and DevOps tools? What are some of those things that maybe an organization should keep in the back of their head as they're thinking about this and looking to engage with those type of tools?
Well, Dan, why don't you take this one? I think when you see customers implementing, CPQ or Revenue Cloud, it's first part of the question. So I think you have a great vantage point on that. So why don't you start with that, and I can talk maybe a little bit more about the DevOps side of it.
Sounds good. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Especially companies, and we'll see this as a gap in architecture all the time. As I mentioned, we'll do a lot of assessments and look at the end-to-end business application architecture or enterprise architecture that a client has. And, a lot of times we'll find gaps. It'll be a SaaS customer, someone selling recurring subscriptions and maybe not having the tooling that actually supports all those lifecycle changes throughout the term of a customer. So everything from that initial purchase to all the midterm changes to renewals, and being able to connect all those transactions into a single view of the customer. That's typically when clients will start thinking about a CPQ, also having very complex pricing, lots of pricing changes, doing complex bundling, needing some of the product structures that a CPQ tool will enable. I think I always say, and I think we have smarter purchasers nowadays, smarter customers that, back when we first adopted a CPQ solution, I think, again, we always go in very focused on, we need this new tool, it's going to solve all our problems. And then having that realization of, hey, it's really about making sure that we're thinking about the change management from the beginning and leading with that so that we do have good adoption. It's about the process change and the policy change. It's about not building legacy ways of doing business into the new tooling, and really treating this as a transformation, and making sure that we think about all the ways that we sell and want to sell, and what's been holding us back from being able to do that. So making sure that you have a good reference architecture and a process design and a change plan in place. And then I think we've both touched on, Max, never too early to be thinking about DevOps and controls design and controls narratives, and making sure that you have that whole environment management process in mind and designed in advance.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I think about this question, right, I think there's sort of two parts to it. One is productivity, right? One is, call it, compliance. And so on the productivity side, look, I'll tell you this way, Prodly, right, are a small startup, 50 person company, and we do use CPQ, right? And it's not that we have tremendous compliance concerns just yet, right? But it is making our sales teams more productive. It does provide certain amount of control in terms of ensuring that, the pricing that goes out is correct, that it follows the rules. Right. So we see, and certainly at Steelbrick, days, we've seen a lot of startups, a lot of, particularly in high tech, adopt CPQ fairly early in their journey, right, for that reason. But then as you sort of look at bigger, more mature companies adopting CPQ, I think for them, compliance is a big driver, in addition to productivity. And that's where obviously the DevOps tooling is sort of peanut butter and jelly to CPQ, right? Where, it can really ensure that, you have, productive releases, that you're able to make changes, so you maintain that business agility that we talk about. You can make changes quickly and easily. but also maintain quality and your compliance posture while doing that. And so that's really important for bigger companies, of course, particularly in regulated industries, right?
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great. And thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that's definitely helpful to keep in mind. And, while we're on the topic of this and keeping those points in mind, I guess if we were to actually measure this in quantifiable terms, are there certain KPIs that an organization can track to measure the effectiveness of this, of CPQ and DevOps integration efforts when they are keeping these points that you mentioned in their minds?
Oh, for sure. There's lots of different effectiveness or success metrics or KPIs. Of course, operationally, performance-wise, typically things around measuring speed and accuracy and effectiveness and cost. So what is, quote, turnaround time, number of exceptions, number of touches, number of approvals, time to close, manual exception rates, quote to contract turnaround, some of those more operational things for sure.
Or even sort of more business performance metrics, like whatever outcome you're trying to optimize for, right? Maybe it's higher average deal size, or it's lower discounting, or it's product attach rate, right? So we had a customer early on at Steelbrick that really wanted to attach services to their product because they did some research and realized that it really drives downstream retention rates for customers, right? Which kind of makes sense, right? If you have services and you properly implement the product, the chances are higher than not that you're going to be successful and renew. And on the DevOps side, I think there's a kind of well-established framework for this. It's called DORA. It's something that a group at Google had, group of researchers at Google had come up with, and it's basically measuring really those kind of more IT specific metrics, specifically around releases, right? How long it takes from the time that you make a change to the time it's released, what's the failure rate, how long does it take you to recover from a failure if there is one, God forbid, right? So these are kind of more IT types of metrics, although I would certainly encourage, for folks to think about beyond DORA and kind of really think about this like value stream metrics, which is a term that Gartner uses, right? And the difference is it's not just about the release management, it's really about the entire process, right? So how long does it take you from not just the time you made the change to the time you release it, but how long does it take you from the ideation, from the time that you had an idea or request had come in to the time that it's live and driving business value, right? So kind of broadening that process beyond just release management and maybe regression testing, but really looking at the whole application lifecycle management process from start to finish.
Great. That's awesome. We appreciate you sharing your experience and your industry knowledge. One thing I wanted to highlight because, I know sometimes I could be a talker. It's part of my job, right? But I would love to open the floor up if anyone has any questions that they're curious about knowing the answer to, or just curious more about their experience. I want to open up the chat to see if anyone had any questions. Feel free to plop them in there, and we're certainly happy to bring it to Max and Danielle's attention. Hopefully, we can provide some insight. Don't be shy. But if not, that's no problem at all. Just want to make sure we give a chance to open up the floor in case if anyone was curious about some of the talking points that we went over today. And if not, that's completely okay. We hope that you found some insightful information from some of the things that we did talk about. I know we heard a lot. Oh, there we go. Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary.
Good question. Thank you, Mary.
Yes. So it looks like Mary has asked, so when is best to start speaking with a customer about best practices with CPQ and DevOps?
When is the best time to start speaking to a customer about that? Sorry.
Yeah, I think
I'm
she.
gonna say.
I imagine you're a service provider, right, Mary, or working sort of on the service provider side. So, like you're saying, when is I think she's asking when is the best time to bring up CPQ and DevOps for a client. So, why don't you go ahead, Danielle? I'm sure you live and breathe this every day. So
Yeah.
let's start, and then I'll chime in as well.
Yeah, so very good question. I think it's a little bit twofold. I would say prior to this year, well, I guess it's very cyclical. So we either have a set of customers who are coming to us and maybe they've already purchased a CPQ tool or a CLM tool or a billing tool or whatever, name your enterprise business application. And so I think that happens in the sales cycle much earlier from the perspective of a partner, an implementation partner and services partner. I think then we also, especially in my role and with our revenue platform strategy group, we're usually getting people very upstream from any sort of business application purchase. So a lot of it is assessment. Come in, let's take a look at our end-to-end enterprise architecture. Let's do a full process assessment and technology assessment and find where we have gaps, not only to best practices in the market from a business practice perspective, but also in maybe technology. Do we have gaps in our technology? Are we not using our technology appropriately? So I think it depends on where that customer is and what we're speaking to them about. But for sure, out of our assessments, I think we will always speak about DevOps early and often because having been a customer, I'm very passionate about that piece of it because it typically is an afterthought. And then, CPQ tools as we get to learn about the client and get into things, we're always leading with the best practices first.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, obviously when to bring up CPQ is depends on the customer maturity and where they are with, CRM adoption, their digital transformation journey, right? So you as a consultant obviously have your finger on the pulse of that and probably can figure out the best place to bring up CPQ. But I can certainly tell you that the best time to bring up DevOps is as soon as you bring up CPQ, right? Because it is a problem that needs to be thought through, and again, like the whole point of technologies like CPQ, like Revenue Cloud, right, is to drive that business agility in the business systems, right? So, and I always say that go live is the beginning of the journey, not the end, and you really need to think about how you're going to make changes to your CPQ deployment or your CLM deployment or to whatever enterprise business application deployment, right? Because if you're not, you are kind of setting yourself up for that shelfware and not realizing the full return on your investment.
Yeah. And to your point that you made earlier, Max, you can't stress enough, especially what makes these tools so adaptable and so nimble is the fact that it's very data driven. And that's often a much harder thing when it comes to how you manage those changes between environments and into production. It's not as easy as spinning up a change set or using some other automation tool like CI/CD automation tool. So
curse and a blessing.
Yeah.
There's some nuances that come with these data-driven low-code applications, as we call them, right? And so you have the right tool to streamline those changes for your IT team, but more importantly, like I said, to bring your business operations teams that ultimately own these applications and are the ultimate stakeholders who have the most domain expertise, right? They're the ones who know about the changes that are being made and why they should be made and what the business outcomes that they're attached to are. So why not let them participate in the change management process as much as possible?
Great. Fantastic. So, Mary, we hope you find that informative and helpful with answering your question. Figured maybe give one more opportunity for anyone else who wants to field any more questions our way. But if not, no worries. But seriously, don't be shy. We're all friendly over here. I know that we heard a lot about some of the effective strategies about operationalizing and monetizing products. Figuring before maybe we wrap up the webinar, if there were any other final thoughts that anyone had here, or Max or Danielle, if there anything in specific that you wanted to talk about before we part ways today, and maybe send them off with some good little bite-sized nuggets of wisdom about CPQ and all these points that we talked about.
Well, I will just leave by saying, if you want to connect and certainly pick my brains, whether, it's CPQ or DevOps, application lifecycle management or whatever, you can find me on LinkedIn. Just connect or send me a direct message and I'll get back to you.
Yeah. And
you want to share where to find you?
yeah, same. I think the thing I missed most from being a customer were the network of people, were, making those connections and, being on the customer advisory board and speaking with other customers. So always happy to connect and help in any way we can. And, obviously Globant is a partner and ready to help anyone, anywhere.
Fantastic, you two. Thank you so much. Yeah, so to learn more, feel free to reach out to Danielle and her team. Max is open, and we'll also be following up after this recording too, in case if anyone wants to have a quick chat with us, learn a little bit more. But just wanted to say thank you for everyone's time today. Thank you, Max and Danielle, for hopping on and having this great discussion with us. And I really hope that everyone found today informative and was able to leave here with some good bites of information. So thank you, everyone. I think we can conclude it here, but I just want to say thanks again, and hopefully we all get to connect soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Danielle, thank you so much. Great to see you.
Thank you, Max. You too.
Always
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you too, Raj. Bye.